Ming Lee, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I'm so glad you are here. We are so grateful, all the way from the other side of the world. So you're at the Royal Northern College of Music, RNCM. Tell us about that, man.
So my school is, I think it's one of the only pop conservatoires in the UK. And here I'm currently studying keyboards. That's my principal study. And we cover all sorts of genres, like pop, jazz, and funk, everything in between, all that stuff.
Yeah, man. And you're most passionate about, is it pop music or pop and jazz? What's your favorite genre?
I think right now I am leaning a bit more towards jazz.
Yeah.
Just because I'm studying it. I need to consume a lot of it.
Right, man.
So for now, it's that. But I appreciate every other type of music.
I'm over here in Nashville right now, is where I am as we're recording. And you're in Manchester, England. But Ming is originally from Vietnam and spent some time in Japan for school as well. Tell us a little bit about your journey growing up in Vietnam and learning the piano.
It has been quite a journey, I have to say. So I was born and raised in Vietnam. I grew up there for 15 years of my life. I make it sound like it's a lot, but it's not. But yeah, growing up, I heard a lot of piano music, and I always wanted to learn piano. The sad thing is we couldn't really afford a piano back then. And my parents were thinking like, oh yeah, you really like music. And I think it's quite funny. When I was 11, my mom bought me a classical guitar. And she was like, you can't really afford a piano, but you can try picking up the guitar instead. So I tried that for a few months. I kind of liked it, but still my passion was still for piano. I wanted to play it so bad. It seemed so cool for me. So fast forward to when I was 15, I think this is 2020. Yes, around that time. I applied to this school in Japan because I've always wanted to study abroad and like experience the world. So I applied to that school and I was very fortunate to get a full ride to study there. I came to Japan when I was 15 years old, and that's when I started learning piano there. That's when I started teaching myself piano, because the school has a piano in their cafeteria, and every day after school I would just go to that room, sit there, mess with the scales and everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how it all started.
That's amazing. So today we're going to talk about what it means to be a self-taught pianist like yourself, and just kind of get tips from you as far as you teaching yourself. That's kind of how we got connected, was through Instagram. And you guys who are listening should definitely go follow Ming on Instagram. But I just want you to take us through, Ming, kind of how you learned piano, and also even you've learned multiple languages, and tell us your whole journey of this. And you're 19 years old, so you're very young. You have a long life to still live and a long way to go, man. But just, take us through that whole self-taught journey when you started at 15.
It's interesting that you asked about learning how to speak English, because in Vietnam, it's quite a big thing. Everyone wants to speak English because it's like apparently the cool thing to do, right? Being fluent in another language. I had an advantage when I was studying in school, because a lot of the kids around me were just studying English like as if it's a subject, like rote memorization and like writing new words every day. You know, like very classic traditional education. They teach English in school.
Okay.
But I kind of had an advantage in that, because growing up, I've always been consuming English content. I've always been watching like English animations, like Barney the dinosaur and everything.
Yeah.
Like growing up, and Home Alone was one of my biggest things, one of the biggest things that I consumed when I was growing up, when I was like 6 or 7 or something. And back then, I didn't have a clue what they were talking about. I couldn't even read Vietnamese subtitles. I was just watching the whole thing. The words were coming into my head. So I think after a while, as I grow up, I started to pick up words here and there. And I think I remember my first vocabulary was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, because on Disney Channel, back then there was still a Disney Channel, they were saying things like Phineas and Ferb, Monday, 7 p.m. And over a few weeks, I started to learn like, okay, Monday means tu hai in Vietnamese, and then Tuesday is tu ba, and then I started to get it. And then eventually the vocabulary starts adding up as I consume more. So I had an advantage way beforehand because I've been consuming stuff. When I was 12 and 13, I had a very big passion to leave the country to study abroad. Because consuming and seeing so much stuff from English speaking countries, I wanted to experience that myself. I feel like the world is a lot bigger than what I'm currently experiencing. So I was like, I need to leave Vietnam. This education system isn't really for me. I'm not learning a lot. It's all rote memorization. I wasn't learning anything, and I wanted to leave. So when I was 13, I really doubled down on learning English. That's when I started learning it like proper academic words and everything. So I bought books, I studied for myself again, did like those English standardized tests and everything. And when by the time I was 15, that's when I was lucky enough to like heard to hear about this school in Japan, and I applied, and I was so lucky to get into that school as well. So that's when everything started happening.
Before we get too far into the musical journey, tell us your favorite thing about Vietnam.
So many things. I even realized that I love Vietnam way more since I left. Like I was saying, when I was 13, I wanted to leave, and then once I left, I'm like, oh, Vietnam's actually a pretty beautiful country. So I think the thing I love the most about Vietnam, it is definitely not the geographical place of Vietnam, but it is the people and the culture that I have. And Vietnamese culture is so intimate. Everyone feels like they know each other. And like I can tell you a story. So I found a pho shop in Manchester, and I went with my Vietnamese friend, and that restaurant was hosted by a Vietnamese family. They were running that restaurant, and we came in, and it felt like home, and they just came to us and chatted with us like we're like family. It felt really intimate. That's one of the things that I love about Vietnamese people. It's like we understand each other.
So when you started learning the piano and you were 15, what was like step number one? You obviously already had some kind of musical background a little bit, but tell us about when you kind of kicked it into high gear and you really started teaching yourself.
With piano, I had zero background. I was never trained when I was in Vietnam because I didn't have a piano available to me.
I hear you.
So when I came to Japan, what I started doing is practicing my scales. And I had a roommate. He's from Malaysia, and he was classically trained. And he was hearing that I am trying to teach myself the piano, and so he taught me the basics of scales. He taught me the whole half, whole half, like the formula for a major scale. And once I got that, I was like, oh wow, that's how it all works. All the 12 keys make sense. Because I didn't know what scales were, right? Like, how do you play scales? But once I learned that formula, I was like, right, that is it.
Yeah.
So I started applying that to 12 keys, and every day after school, I mentioned this earlier, but so every day after school, I would go to the cafeteria and sit down, do my scales, both hands, up and down, 12 of them. That for like the first 3 months. That's all I played. I didn't know how to play anything
And that's
else.
so important. A lot of people skip over that, but the fundamentals, you have to have those or you don't have the toolbox to play.
So
You know what I'm saying?
It is so important. I was so glad that I chose that kind of like approach to it, because a lot of people, when they started learning piano, they started learning simple songs, right? Like Twinkle, 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 Little Star and everything. But I don't think starting at that point, you probably won't understand how the melody and the harmony connects. But after 3 months of me just playing 12 keys up and down, country motion and everything, it started being programmed into my fingers, and the harmony starts to make sense. My fingers start to travel naturally.
Yeah. And when you learned those skills, were you going by a certain book or a certain curriculum when you were learning those skills? Like as far as knowing how your fingers are, because if you're learning that totally on your own, you don't really know when to cross over. How are you learning that?
So yeah, I mentioned my friend, my roommate. He showed me the crossing, like, okay, so 1, 2, 3, and then you cross your thumb there. And then for all your black keys, you start on your second finger. And I was like, okay.
There you go.
So I started applying that. But it's the same thing, right? For all the white keys, you start on 1. And for all the black keys, you start on your second finger.
That's good.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. When did you start learning chord structure and that kind of thing and really getting into harmony, counterpoint?
So the summer of 2021, that's June 2021, I discovered this guy called Jacob Cullen.
Oh,
I'm sure
man.
everyone listening
Yes. What a hero.
I'm sure everyone listening knows he is truly one of my heroes.
It's amazing.
And I discovered a YouTube video of him talking about harmony, and I was like, oh, this guy is so fascinating. And the more I dig into him, the more I'm hooked into it, like into that world of harmony and music theory and everything. Yeah. And his passion for music is so contagious. His passion is so contagious that I started like properly learning, okay, what is harmony? What are chords? And so that summer I started learning about triads and chord extensions. That was still like a bunch of math to me back then, but yeah, I started learning, like just basic triads, minor chords and major chords, and then like eventually I got to the 7 chords. Yeah. And over that summer, I had nothing else to do because I was stuck in Japan that year because of COVID. I couldn't travel back home to Vietnam, so I was in Japan in summer, and all I had was just a keyboard and like a room. Like I managed to find a room to stay there in over the summer, and there was a piano there. So the whole summer I spent just literally digging into harmony and learning all that stuff.
That's awesome. That's really important.
The biggest thing that I learned that summer is dominant chords, and then I started understanding 2-5-1s, and then I started learning about number theory.
Yes.
And all that stuff. It just keeps on snowballing really quickly.
Right. So when you started at 15, at what point were you able to start kind of playing by ear and listening to songs and playing it back and knowing what was going on? Like how soon did that develop?
I think it started developing when my knowledge of scales are sufficient enough. Because I've been playing these 12 scales for so long that I already know what they sound like. Right. There's a teacher in my school. He was a music teacher, but at the time I didn't take his class. And he would play music out loud every lunch. And I would sometimes just try to play along with what he's playing.
Right.
And then he started noticing, and he was like, Ming, how did you do that? Just hearing. Yeah. And he's like, you should take music. You should really try that next year. Right. So yeah, that's how he was the one that told me that I can play by ear.
That's neat, man. That's neat. So when you listen to a song, what do you first listen for? And then being able to build out the rest of the song, what are your step-by-step process when you're kind of thinking through a song when you're listening it before you even get to the piano?
Always the tonic. I'm always listening out for the tonic. There's an interesting story to tell about me playing by ear. Yeah, man. Is back then, because I just started music, I did not know anything else, and I didn't know what perfect pitch or relative pitch was. And the more I learn into it, the more I start learning about perfect pitch and relative pitch. And I was trying to develop some sort of, I didn't know what kind of pitch I have, right? So I started ear training as well. I started just listening to pitches and memorizing it. But it is also quite apparent to me now that I've been playing just scales on repeat for 3 months. So I started training myself to memorize these pitches. And at this point, I can very quickly identify a pitch, like A, F, D, E. I know that very well at this point now. When I was learning the scales, I couldn't. But as I start memorizing, I started knowing the pitches really well. And I'm always listening out for the tonic to find out the key.
That's good, man.
And I'm just getting quicker at that every time I do it.
That's good. Going from that, and you're listening to the rest of the song, what other elements are you listening to next? Once you find the key that you're in, what are you doing next?
So obviously, I mentioned before that dominant chords are so important because that's the point of tension. Once I figured out those two things, and it's quite natural once I got the tonic, immediately the dominant chord is the fifth away. Right. Once I got that, everything else in between kind of falls naturally because it's either a 6. Some of the songs when I was playing, it's either like the 6th or the 3rd, which is very near what I was hearing.
Absolutely. So a lot of people, when they're ear training, you can't quite go straight from the key to deciphering chords, but a lot of the cheat code for that, right, is to listen to the bass notes to see what the bass line is. And based on the bass line, you know what chords are being built. And sometimes it's an inversion, like a 1/3 or a 5 over the 7 or something like that. So a lot of the ways to break it down too, I've found, is that you find the key and then you find the bass line for at least the root of the chord. that you're going to play. You're going to play. A lot of people go straight for the melodies, and you can't really do anything if you have a melody, you know what key you're in, but you really need to be able to build those chords. So I think that's great what you said, man, is kind of recognizing those chords, which in addition to when you learned your scales, you went ahead and learned the chords as well, which is so important. And anyone who's wanting to learn by ear and play by ear, it's important to know what chords correlate with every single note in your scale so that you can decipher that. Tell us more about playing by ear, and then you're eventually being able to determine jazz songs, which is pretty complicated. You know, you go from pop songs and simple genres to more complex jazz stuff. And I know I've seen on your Instagram a few things where you've listened to some songs, played it back, and you talk about what's going on. Tell us about that journey and kind of how you learned to play those complicated chords.
I would emphasize the importance of learning and knowing your scales, and not just like being able to play it like shape wise, but being able to internalize it and hear it in your head even before you play it. And there's I don't think there's a secret tip or hack or anything. It really does just come with time.
Right.
And to build on top of that, once I'm able to hear those different chord tones very well now, I started expanding in terms of like harmony, right? I'm starting learning about like the sevenths and the nines and the 13s, and the nines and 13s are quite simple. They're always there. But for the seven chords, it's very simple to know what a flat 7 is and what a major 7 is. And I started building my chords out from there. So a C major 7, and then I started learning about, okay, a C dominant 7 is just moving the 7 down. And then if I move the third down, it's a minor 7, and that's all there really is that I needed to know. I honestly, at this point, I kind of forgot technically what it means, but I started learning with the 7s. They took me a good month to get my head around and like get these new shapes.
Yes, yeah.
Because these are new shapes. Before, I only had triads.
Right.
Now I'm dealing with 4 notes, and the shapes are quite different now.
Yes.
But from then on, I'm starting to... It is about the shape. And I wasn't thinking much about like, oh, this interval, that interval. I was literally just thinking about the shape.
That's good. That's what a lot of guitar players do too, you know? A lot of shape-based stuff. What things are you learning now in college that has been really eye-opening to you as a musician?
I think the biggest thing that I learned that completely changed everything that I've been doing so far is it's not about quantity. Like when you're talking about practice, it's not about quantity. It's about quality practice. And my teacher was telling me this because he noticed that I was practicing too much. And I wasn't able to perform as well as I could have been. That's what he said. And he was like, Ming, you're practicing 4 hours every day. That's not how you should do it. If you can find time, just even 20 minutes a day, really micro focus on just a single part of a song or that single transition between those 2 chords and get comfortable with that, then you can play the rest of the song. And it actually works. Wow. I tried to apply that this semester, and it is working.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your practice routine, what that looks like for you from like a week to week or maybe a day-to-day basis. What's your practice schedules look like, man?
So before I was trying to, any time that I had free for the rest of the day, I would just book a practice room for 4 hours and go in there. I do not go out. I do not see the sunlight. I go in, 4 hours, I go out, and intense, just do the thing. I try to hit 2 hours of practice every day, but not in one go. So I would split that up throughout my day. Whenever I have a free block, I would use that time to practice, and I would just set that time. I'm not going to sit any longer than that. Just set a timer there, 40 minutes for now. I sit down, the timer rings, I end. I do another thing, keep myself sane.
Do you ever find yourself distracted while you're practicing, start playing something else that you hear or noodle around with?
That is the biggest problem when I was doing long stretches of practice. I think realistically, none of us have an attention span of 4 hours to focus on something. And I think that's the biggest hindrance towards growth. And like my teacher was saying, intentional practice. You don't do 4 hours of anything.
Right, man.
Just be intentional.
Be intentional with that. I love that.
And with 40 minutes, I don't think I have time to even start noodling around, right? It's just, I only have 40 minutes. The timer's there. There's a pressure of the timer.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I would just, okay, let's just get this chords, get this new voicings.
Right.
And I only have 40 minutes to do that. it helps a lot more.
I really like that. Tell us about the practice rooms over there, man. What do they look like? And what kind of pianos are you playing on?
If you do go on my Instagram, you'll be able to see what the practice rooms looks like, because a lot of my first content I did was in the practice rooms. So there's a keys lab. They call it a keys lab, and in that room there's a bunch of synthesizers and Fender Rhodes and a bunch of other Nord like electro keyboards, and there's a Nord Stage 3 in that room as well. A lot of other piano practice rooms are reserved for classical students, and they're all Steinways.
Tell us a little bit about your journey on social media. I mean, you are giving great tips for people that, you know, if your 15 or 16-year-old self would have seen your account that you have now, you could have really learned these things a lot faster. Tell us about your video, social media content creator journey, kind of how that started and where you're wanting to go with your social media.
You're one of the few people that described exactly what I'm trying to do. Because when I started making those videos, I was thinking, how can I help Ming 3 years ago when he was learning himself? I was thinking about myself. I was just like, let's make this video for my past self 3 years ago. Maybe help him learn a bit quicker.
Right.
That's exactly what I was thinking when I was making these videos. To talk about starting on social media and everything, I'm still very new to this journey. I only started like 3-4 months ago when I started making videos and posting them online. It's one of my biggest fears is putting myself out there and like even talking to a camera. Now I'm doing a podcast with you, and that's insane. 4 months ago, I would never think that I could like do this. I knew that I can't just be afraid for so long. I'm almost turning 20. If there's any time to be publicly embarrassed, it is now.
Right.
That's what I told myself. And I was like, Ming, just put yourself out there. Make some bad videos at first.
Yeah.
No one's going to watch it. And I did. But then I quickly learned about this Japanese philosophy called Kaizen. And to quickly summarize what it is, and it's just 1% improvement every day. That's what the philosophy is about. And they apply it everywhere. And I started applying that to my videos. I made one video. It was fine. And I was like, let's try to make it 1% better on my second video. I think I read a quote. I forgot who said it, but it's so influential to me. And I really took it to my heart. And the quote goes something like, the sooner you can be you, the sooner people looking for you will find you. When I started this whole content journey, I was in like a kind of analysis paralysis kind of mode. When I was looking around, like everyone else plays so much better than I am. I've only been playing for like 3 years. Everyone else has so much more chops than I am. And then I'm like, I can't do anything. And then I heard that quote and I'm like, you know what? Let's just be me.
Yes.
Because I can't compete, clearly.
Right.
But the only way to get out of the competition is to not be in the competition at all. Like, let's try out this trend with the hope of getting views. It never took off. But then the moment that I decided to, you know what, let's just share this thing. And that was the Jacob Collier video. It was 12 a.m. in my room and I was like, oh, that clip is very interesting. I should make a video about it. I got out of bed, set up the stuff, filmed it, and it happened to take off.
That's amazing.
You know, so it's not about pleasing any algorithm. It really is just about being yourself.
That's so good, Ming.
I think.
That is so good. Let's talk about the gospel session that you were a part of. I saw the live session and I saw the little clips, and man, okay, if y'all have not heard this video on Ming's Instagram account, you need to go stop this podcast and go listen to it because the vocals are incredible. The horns are cool. It's awesome. You were even apologizing for the shaky stuff of the camera or whatever. I don't even think you didn't have to apologize, man. It was some good quality stuff. Tell us about this session, dude, and tell us about the players there at the school and just kind of like the whole project in general, man. Tell us about this.
I love talking about other musicians way more than I want to talk about myself. I'm so glad you asked. So that video that you saw was a promo video for the gospel choir concert. My teacher, Wayne Ellington, he's a singer and he's many different things. And he saw my videos and he reached out to me and he was like, hey, Ming, do you want to come to our gospel choir session and film some stuff for us? And I gladly just accepted. And that was what that video was about. I was just filming a bunch of stuff for them to put on social media. And yeah, that was for my teacher. It's only new this year that there is a gospel choir led by Wayne Ellington. And he put his heart and soul into this. And everyone that participated are incredible musicians. They're all singers in the NCM. Some are like from the classical course, some are taking opera and stuff, and some are in the pop course that I am doing. So it's like a blend of the pop course and the classical course. It's really wonderful that this is happening. Also, taking back to like the whole content thing, I think what a lot of people fear is they don't have enough gear.
Yes.
And I really think that gear doesn't matter.
Yes.
Because if I'm gonna be waiting until I get enough gear, that's gonna take me forever.
Very true.
So I literally just started with my phone and everything. It's really not about camera quality, it's really lighting.
Yeah.
Like, phones are so decent, the cameras are so decent, like they're decent enough to make content. So if anyone listening that wants to start content, you really should like just whip out your phone, get a light.
Absolutely. Tell us about your pop class and any theory classes or music classes that you're taking, all about that community.
It is a wonderful environment to be in as a musician. And what I can say about the pop course is the way it's structured is I have my one-on-one lessons with my piano teacher every Monday. And on Tuesday, I will have an artist development class. So that's all about the music business. You learn about the ins and outs of it, like the sync licensing and the copywriting and all that stuff in artist development. And on Wednesday, we have our composition class. So we learn about, just how to write songs, songwriting, all that stuff in general. And production also is on Wednesday. And Thursday, we have our band musicianship class. So we are put together in like group bands. So everyone in our year are like grouped together in small bands of like 5 to 6 musicians, each doing a different thing. So I get to work with the people doing vocals on the pop course and people doing bass on the pop course. And I'm the keys guy. And that's on Thursday. And on Friday, usually we will have a master class in the afternoon. And that is like if the school has invited any big musician or like working musician in the industry, they'll have them come over for that master class. And we recently had Corey Wong come over. He came on October when I was here, and I went up and I shook Corey Wong's hand, and that was like the most surreal feeling ever. I truly felt all of his guitar wisdom got transferred through my fingers. Like that moment when I shook his hand, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm having this
surging through you. The talent is surging through your hand.
The talent.
Gotta go make a video right now. That's amazing.
Which I did.
You did?
And that's my first ever video on Instagram.
Oh, is it really? That's awesome.
Yeah, if you scroll all the way down, the first reel that I posted was a Corey Wong song, and that was a song that he played.
Wow.
In that masterclass. It was so inspiring. Obviously, all the musicians here are very, very talented, and I think it's also quite a selective school. It's also like, I think it's the same acceptance rate as the Royal College of Music. So it is understandable that everyone here is very, very good at what they do, but no one feels like that because imposter syndrome and everything. And certainly when I came here, I had zero confidence. I was like shrunken into this shell of like, I am not good enough, Wow. But I think the more I spend time with confident people around me, the more I'm starting to find that confidence in myself as well. And that's how I'm able to like start making videos and stuff, because I just stopped caring about not being good enough anymore. I'm just doing it.
I love that, man. Talk more about your friends, your classmates, whoever. Kind of tell us more about them and who they are. You said they're very confident people. They're inspiring people, to be around. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Definitely. I think we're all very different people pursuing very different corners of music and different niches of the music industry. I think the goal here is there's no single person here that inspired me to do anything. Everyone here, even though we're so different, we're very different people with very different personalities, pursuing very different music, but we're all headed towards the same thing. It's the passion.
That's awesome.
And that kicks me into gear. The fact that everyone here is so confident at what they're doing. They know what they can deliver and they know what they can contribute. And they're all working towards something.
That's
and that helped me finding that confidence for me to pursue something. And that's when I started making videos, because I'm like, let's do something.
Right.
But Manchester, it's not like quite as built as London, if you want to compare that. But it is a big city, I think. And people are very young, because most of us are just like university students. And around here, even the block that I'm living in, like there are 4 universities nearby. So there's a lot of talented, young, passionate, ambitious people around. there's something strange about being in that environment that makes you also want to, it pushes you forward, you know?
Right, man. Absolutely.
And it's also a very lively in terms of music because there's venues everywhere. There's always music playing someplace, somewhere.
You've mentioned Jacob Collier. You've mentioned Corey Wong coming to your school. I guess when you were learning piano, 15, 16, 17 years old, you're still learning. We're always still learning. But kind of tell us, who is your inspiration? Who was your inspiration? Who are your favorite bands? Who are your favorite artists?
I think Jacob Collier was definitely my first inspiration to start looking into music. And I think along the line, I discovered Nare Soul. I think she's a Juilliard-trained classical pianist, and her content is also incredible. And I took a lot of inspiration from her content to make my content as well. That's what we do, right? As artists, we just steal from other people and make our own thing.
Right.
I have to be honest. There's so many people that I listen to. Wolfpack is one of my favorite bands.
Absolutely.
So that's on the funk side of things. I have such a wide collection of music that I can't really pinpoint. So I was talking about Jack Conte. You've definitely heard of him, right?
I don't think I have, man.
Jack Conte. He's the keys player for Scary Pockets.
You're teaching me new things.
He's one of my biggest creative inspiration. He makes me feel really creative, and like he inspires me to pursue creative
That's
stuff.
awesome.
I think it's Jacob Collier, Nare Soul, and Tom Misch. Love their music so much.
Okay, I will definitely check those out. Of course, I know Jacob Collier, but the other two, I need to check them out, man.
They are kind of the pillars of what I want to create. I want to take all of their stuff and make that, whatever that's going to look like in the next
That's
few
incredible. Yeah, talk about that, man. What's your ultimate career goal and like lifelong dream?
I think there is no dream job, especially within the music industry. And I think I learned this from Wayne as well, the choir director. And he was telling me that none of us have full-time jobs. Even I don't have a full-time job. I have streams. And my dream is to have the same streams that he does, because he is a landlord. He's like solo artist. He does recording. He's a choir master. He's a conductor. He does all these different things, and all of it is earning him money in some sense. My dream is to be able to build all these streams, and same thing with social media.
I think 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, when people said, oh, I'm going to do video content or just be a YouTuber for a living, that especially the older generation, they would think that's humorous. They wouldn't believe you that that's actually
crazy,
a career field or something that you could monetize and do for a living. But I mean, 2024 and onwards, going up 2025, 26, I mean, it's going to be more and more online presence and online opportunities. So I think that's huge, and I think you should lean all into that, man.
I think social media is very much real, especially for my generation. It is a real thing. It is out there, and it is going to be everywhere. And I think especially with the older generation, I don't think they're aware of what this kind of digital world looks like. So it could come across as humorous. And even right now, when I'm kind of like explain to what the rest of my family, when they ask what I'm trying to do with a career, and when I say that I'm going to make content, they'll probably laugh at me. Not my parents, obviously. They know exactly what I'm doing, and they trust me completely. But to explain it to other people, it would be really hard, because it is a strange world to even like visualize. Like, what does it look like to be a content creator? And I learned this from a masterclass with Sam Greenfield, who's also he's a famous saxophone player. He's got a band. He also came to the RNCM, and he also got started doing content. And I asked him a few questions, and he said that like this whole online world is very much like building a business, like your own small local business. It's like window shopping, you know, like when you walk on the street and you see like a really cool shop through the window, and you're like, oh, that's interesting, and you want to walk in there. And it's like the same concept with crafting a social media page, and like it kind of worked, considering the fact that you reached out to me via Instagram. It's the presence of being there and getting people into your world.
Yeah.
That's what
absolutely.
It is. And I think I always took a different approach towards chord progressions and everything, because I see things very near. I see things very micro. Like I think a thing that helped me with chord progressions is I don't think of them in numbers anymore. In some cases it helped to think of like, oh, this whole progression is, 3 6 2 5 1 and everything. But then like I kind of taken an approach, and I started noticing a different kind of pattern within jazz is it's every chord progression it's always made up with a combination of 2-5-1s, substitutions, secondary dominants, and backdoor approaches. And I'm seeing all these chord progressions not as the chord progression itself, but as, the combination of these
Interesting.
things, these tricks. Like,
yeah. For example, like give me some examples, man.
So I think an example that I talked about a while ago with the video that I made is, like a 3-6-2-5-1 progression. Like, what does it sound like? 3, 6, and then 2, and then 5, and then 1. And that is just, that's just a series of moving up the circle of fifths from the right side. And I wasn't thinking of them as that anymore. I wasn't thinking of it as strings of numbers. I was just thinking that, okay, I'm in C, and then I go to a common tone chord with the tonic, that's A. Because, in C major and F major, they both share A. So I'm just thinking about that.
Yeah.
And then this, the 5 dominant, that's just the dominant. That's a secondary dominant of F. I'm not thinking as 5. I'm thinking as secondary dominant tonic. That's how I would approach it. It's just a bunch of tritone subs and mu chords and secondary dominants to get to where you're going. It's like it's about like a journey. It's not like this is a string of chord progression. It's like a journey of getting to this to that.
For those who may not know what a secondary dominant is, your dominant chord, you're in this key of C, right? And then the dominant is G, or
Yes.
G, really G7, the dominant 7. But then when we're talking about secondary dominants, we're talking about the 5 chords of the chord you're about to go to. So it might not necessarily be in the key signature.
So if you're trying to go from C to A minor, the secondary dominant is C and then E dominant.
Yeah.
You see how it's like kind of stringing
Absolutely.
together? And I have no idea in terms of numbers what that meant, what the numbers were. I was just like, okay, C, I'm trying to go to A, secondary dominant, and then secondary dominant.
Right.
And then, I'm arriving at
Yeah.
F now. So the whole time, I was keeping in mind that I'm at C, I'm trying to go to F. Right? And I can go even further. I can go, and then A, and then D.
Yes.
I have no idea what the numbers are. I just know how I'm approaching it, because the whole time I'm keeping in mind that I'm in C, I want to go to F. How can I do
Absolutely.
that? And it's just a bunch of these little approaches.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. That's really good. That's really good. But it is encouraging for a lot of people who are learning it, because at the beginning, it has to be very mathematical, right? So like knowing your fifths, knowing the circle of fifths is like a template, right? As if you're taking a math class, you have to
Yes.
think of it very formulaic, which is good for learning. Like Ming, if you play on your piano, you have a C and then go to that secondary dominant E7 to A minor, and then walk it down chromatically and go to G minor, A minor to G minor. Yeah, it's like and then so G minor, then to C7, then to F.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. So
So I don't know what the numbers were. The whole time I was just thinking like, okay, C, and then I'm trying to go A, secondary dominant, chromatic down.
yeah. Yes, sir. It is
so
good, man. The way it's interesting to learn about how other people think about it. I'm always thinking the numbers, man. I'm always thinking the landing point, like as far as the clean numbers, like for me, I pretty much just, there's 7 different notes in the scale before you get back to 1, which is technically the 8th. And so I'm always thinking 1 is my landing point in this progression. Then a 6 is my next landing point. And then 4 is my next landing point. So everything in between are like substitute or passing chords is the way I look at it. Like this is a passing chord to A minor.
So you have a structure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sometimes
Sometimes I do that when the chord progression is simple enough. When it's just like 4 chords, then I'm like, okay, it's just a 1, 5, 6, 4. Then I have that That's how I like to think about it. And like you mentioned a while ago, just like a few minutes ago, it's a lot of this comes with you need to know your intervals well enough.
Yes.
Like you need to know your fifths.
Right.
And again, tying back to what I was saying earlier about like the fact that I've played 12 keys straight for 3 months, that has just helped so much in terms of navigating around because I just know where a fifth is from where.
Exactly.
I know these distances already. So it comes from that knowledge. You need to be comfortable with
100%.
And knowing exactly all that, what all that means.
100%, man. I love that. I love that. So musically speaking, what are some of your goals, some things you're wanting to learn and establish and do more of as far, and I know you're going to be on social media, but what are some things you want to kind of teach on or give some tips on or just kind of take us through your journey? What are some upcoming things that you're really looking forward to?
I am really looking forward to getting better at my craft, which is playing keyboards. And again, I've only started this like 3 years ago, and I've noticed that ever since I came here, and I'm like, when I'm properly trained by a teacher who has been where I have been, he knows a lot of these gaps that I'm missing, and he knows how to like, I guess, harvest all of the talent out of me to make me the best keys player that I can. And I am noticing the improvement in terms of technical skills wise. So I'm looking forward to definitely getting better. I don't have any chops. I just have a really good understanding of the stuff that I'm playing, I guess. But I'm looking forward to get better with that. And music wise, I want to be, just playing, recording stuff. And a lot of things can change in the next 5 years. I can't say for sure. Definitely, I want to be playing keys.
A lot of listeners are listening probably from the United States area over here. And just, can you share a little bit about your social media? Tell us your social media handle.
It's at Ming, so MING .NLY.
Very nice. And y'all need to follow him. Definitely stay connected with him. And feel free to message Ming as well. I know I definitely will stay connected with you, Ming. And if you guys have any questions too, y'all can definitely reach out to me on my social medias or also on the email, carson@theworshipkeys.com. I definitely want to hear from you. I know we're a few episodes in for sure on this podcast series, the very start of the podcast world. And so I'm really appreciative to everyone who is listening to this. I appreciate you guys tuning in to hear about Ming's story, his musical journey. I mean, literally, I know, Ming, this is just the beginning for you, man. And I'm like, I'm going to be rooting for you all the way and seeing where this goes and where this takes off for you even more so. I can't wait till you're on stage with Jacob Collier and you're on stage with Corey Wong and, meeting him again. And
let's hope anything can happen, right? Anything can happen.